Welcome to the Onco PT podcast, where you'll learn from oncology experts, practitioners, and patients to help you on your journey to become a confident and competent Onco PT. Here's your host, Elise Cantu.
Hey Onco PT, and welcome to this episode of the Onco PT podcast. I've been a little radio silent lately, and I have to be honest, for the past 2 weeks or so, I've been basically glued to all of my screens watching the Olympics. If you are a fellow Olympic junkie, first of all, please let me know. Message me on Instagram and let me know, because I am obsessed. And I have to say, my favorite part of the Olympics is probably in this first half, if you will. But to be fair, I've been watching all the sports. So I've been watching rugby, soccer, volleyball, equestrian. I didn't know I was an equestrian fan until now. Rowing, fencing, swimming, gymnastics, all the sports that have been on, I've basically been watching them. You get the idea. But my most favorite thing to watch is swimming. Now, you probably know from this podcast that I'm a former swimmer myself. I'm in high school. Let's be clear. I was never anything fantastic, but I enjoy swimming, and I especially enjoy watching swimming as someone who went through the sport as a youngster, as a youth, and then I coached when I was in high school and college, and then getting to still see some of the great Olympians that I grew up watching actually still competing is really wild to me. That's not really something that we tend to see a lot, especially at the elite athletic level, but we've seen a lot of that in this Olympics. For example, Simone Biles, I don't even know what number Olympics this is for her, but she's been at the game for a long, long time. Same thing with Katie Ledecky. Now, if you remember way back, I think in April or May, I made a post that was essentially the caption. So on Instagram, I'm picturing it in my head right now. It's purple. And it says, sink or swim. And it's something to the effect of why Katie Ledecky is a role model for us as cancer rehab clinicians. Even if you're not a swimming fan, let me explain here. Unless you have been living under a rock, especially in the last 2 weeks, you have probably heard at least some of the hype around American swimmer Katie Ledecky. Long story short, Katie Ledecky is one of the GOATs of Olympics, of swimming, period, especially in her particular events. So she is a long distance swimmer. And I think that is so cool, because that is something I do not have the patience for whatsoever. But to appreciate just how dominant she is, if you have been on social media at all, or if you ever go on the internet and look up pictures of Katie Ledecky, one of the most iconic pictures of her is that she looks like she's swimming by herself in the pool. And it's not because she's swimming by herself. It's actually because she is so far ahead of everyone else that she is completely out of frame from every other swimmer. And in some cases, she is actually racing to lap swimmers on these events, which is so crazy. So anyways, as you can tell, I'm a major Katie Ledecky fan. This episode is not going to be just a love letter to Katie Ledecky, although I could definitely do that if I wanted. But one of the things that has been so cool to watch is not just Katie Ledecky in the pool, but also seeing and hearing about Katie Ledecky out of the pool. So at this Olympics, Katie Ledecky was selected as one of the American swim team captains for Paris 2024. And I'm sure she has some kind of official duties as captain. I don't know what those are. But one of the things that has come up multiple times is just how amazing Katie is, not just as a official leader and captain of the U.S. swim team, but also how much of a mentor she is for younger swimmers who are on the team. And to really put this in perspective, Katie Ledecky was 15 12 years ago when she made her first Olympic team. And now at 27, she is one of the more senior Olympians on the team, especially on the swim team here. And that's really notable for many, many different reasons. One, it's really unusual for a swimmer this old, like quote old. 27 is not old, okay? But it's really unusual for someone like Katie Ledecky, who's 27, to still be performing at this level of swimming, because most swimmers actually peak usually like early to mid 20s. So this is a big deal. So not only is she this amazing athlete who is breaking all these records, who has all these Olympic medals, amazing, but she is not stopping there. She is also reaching the hand back to grab the hand, to grab hold of those younger swimmers and bring them alongside of her. And that has been my favorite part, or one of my favorite parts about watching the Olympics this year, because I think it gives me a little more perspective on what I've grown to love so much about cancer rehab. And one of my favorite parts about cancer rehab, it's the people. And it's not just the patients, but man, I do love those patients. But the people that I've gotten to know and who have done that exact thing for me. Like, I'm the little swimmer who's floundering at the back of the line. And to have so many people reach that hand back and pull me up alongside them, I don't know that I would have experienced that anywhere else in physical therapy, truly, because I haven't seen it anywhere else in physical therapy. Does it happen? I'm sure. But that has been one of my absolute favorite parts of being an onco-PT and staying in onco-PT and working with other onco-PTs. Even though I technically work by myself in my private practice, and what I do here, I'm still able to benefit from those relationships and that mentoring and that encouragement and support that I have received from other onco-PTs. And I think that I know that has made so much of a difference for me in what I have been able to learn and understand at this point in my career, and has also laid out the path for me to know where I need to be going, what I need to be doing as I move forward and continue as an oncology physical therapist, treating patients in the grind, day in and day out, working with people who have been diagnosed with cancer. And I think this example that Katie Ledecky on the Olympic team is setting is such a beautiful picture, example, demonstration of how we should also be implementing that within cancer rehab. So again, to zoom out, Katie Ledecky, one of the greatest swimmers of all time, period. Busy smashing records in the pool, is busy adding to her medal collection, and is doing all these things that alone make her an amazing swimmer. But then on top of that, she is still making the time and taking the time and making the effort to mentor and support other swimmers along every step of the way, right? From, in the daily practices that she is, participating in herself, she's actually doing the training alongside the other athletes, but also after the races and when she's cheering on other teammates. And the reason she does this is that she knows this is the way to cultivate a culture of encouragement and support and excellence, aka gold medal winning teams, which Katie Ledecky has done quite a bit of, both as a solo swimmer, but also on relays and as a team member of Team USA. And the whole reason that this has to do with cancer rehab, aside from, again, like, this is the example, like, what a great tangible example. Also, I just love the Olympics. But this is how we really move cancer rehab into the future, like continue moving it forward. We have seen such tremendous progress in cancer rehab as a field over the past few years, but one of the things that we're also starting to see is a little bit of stagnation. And what I mean by this is that we had so much momentum for so long around cancer rehab, and we're still seeing that, okay? We're still seeing that. But as we're bringing cancer rehab to the masses, it's kind of fizzling out. We're seeing that there are onco-PTs who have excitement and passion around this, and that's not necessarily translating to the availability and accessibility of high-quality cancer rehab for patients in their own communities who are diagnosed with cancer. And so the reason that this is just something that I felt so passionately to talk about today on the podcast is that I think we have lessons to learn from the Olympics. And I don't know about you, but the excitement that I get and the passion I feel for the Olympics, I hope that comes across in the episode we're doing today. No one Olympian, whether that's Katie Ledecky, Simone Biles, Sha'Carri Richardson, anybody, right? Nobody got there to the highest level of their sport alone. It took a team to get them to the point where they could even qualify for the Olympics. But it also took that much more to get them to the Olympics, to where they could perform as a member of a team. Yes, these are all individual athletes, but each of these athletes also participate as part of a team. This translates over to cancer rehab if you really think about it. So walk with me on this journey here. When I was first starting as a physical therapist practicing with oncology patients, I was the only physical therapist on site. I was the only rehab person on site inside of this facility that I was a part of treating oncology patients. And it was lonely. It was really hard. And I feel like I know I really struggled for those 2 years to kind of figure out what the heck I was doing. Was what I was implementing with my patients, was it working? Was this best practice evidence? How did I get the information to inform me if this was best practice or if this wasn't? And a lot of it, the onus was really on me to go out and find this information. And it was hard work. It was tiring. It was exhausting. It took a lot of effort to not only show up for the patients I was seeing, day to day throughout my work day, but then in order to get any kind of feedback on, am I doing what's right? Is what I'm doing working? Is this really in my best interest to implement this with this patient? I had to then go out and seek that elsewhere on my own. And it made for some really long days with really, really early mornings, working through lunch break, and then not leaving the clinic for like hours, it felt like, after my workday was done. It sucked, frankly, and I wouldn't wish that on anybody else. But unfortunately, my experience is not unique within OncoPT, within cancer rehab, and that is a problem, because that practicing in a silo significantly harms patients and leads to fragmented care. Now, I'm not saying that if you are a solo OncoPT working in your own practice or on your own as part of some other, practice, what have you, that you're hurting patients. Please don't take it that way. But that kind of fragmented care where you're working by yourself, kind of doing your own thing, that doesn't lead to best outcomes. That doesn't allow you the perspective and the insight that others can offer in that, whether that's through a, very structured mentorship, or whether you're even just having conversations with like a colleague or, a cancer rehab bestie on, hey, this is what I'm doing with this patient. What would you do in these set of circumstances? How would you address XYZ with your patient, knowing that, this is what I'm experiencing? That kind of community is what's so, so powerful if we are really going to be effective practitioners. So when you operate in a silo on your own, separated, whether that's physically or otherwise, geographically, from other cancer rehab professionals, you're not getting that insight, that support, and frankly, the collaborative opportunities that come with being a part of a team. And again, maybe you don't have the opportunity to be a part of a team on site who is also doing the same thing as you. But we can still benefit from seeking out and finding and establishing and building and relying on that cancer rehab community that is so, so important if we're really going to elevate the standard of what cancer rehab should be for our patients. So when we practice alone, this ultimately contributes to fractured approaches. And this leads to where we're not collaborating, we're not sharing information. That's a whole thing I'm going to get into shortly. And this, unfortunately, can all kind of layer on top of each other to inconsistencies in our patients' care. It can mean delays in treatment for our patients. And unfortunately, which a lot of times you've probably already experienced, increased stress and frustration, not only for your patients who are dealing with this, but also for you. And friend, please hear me out. If you've kind of, if you're multitasking, come back to me here. It's so, so important you hear this. We have got to make sure that you're taking care of you. You have to take care of you first. You cannot pour from an empty pitcher, teacup, teapot, whatever the metaphor is for you here. You cannot give of yourself if you are running on fumes. This is how we get into burnout. And the last thing I want for you is for you to get burned out and then leave this amazing profession if it's not what you want to do. If you decide that, hey, I need to move on, totally cool. I respect you. I respect your decision. But the last thing I want is for you to be excited and passionate about working with this patient population. And ultimately, you have to leave to save yourself. That's horrible. I've been there, and I don't want that for anybody else. So that is why it is so important that we foster this collaboration, this community within cancer rehab, because it doesn't just affect you and your day-to-day, it affects your patients, and it affects your career long-term, and it affects all of us in cancer rehab, because we have to rely on each other if we are going to really catapult cancer rehab into the 21st century and beyond. I hope for many, many centuries. If we're going to do that, we have to start collaborating like we mean it. Collaboration, first up, fuels innovation and progress. By having these conversations and interactions with other onco-PTs, right? Whether they are ahead of you, they're more experienced, or even if they're maybe not as far along as you, maybe they're just starting out. Regardless, there is innovation and progress to be fostered and built upon by fostering this environment of continuous learning and professional development. This is where we are sharing our clinical pearls, our wisdom that we have learned through the process of, again, day in and day out working with oncology patients. We're sharing recent research findings, right? I bet that you have an article you're sitting on right now that I don't have a darn clue is out there, and I could really benefit from that. Same, right? It goes both ways here. You also have different experiences than I do, right? I have a lot of experience working with patients after breast reconstruction. Like, I love working with that patient population. I have a ton of experience with that. You know what I don't have a lot of experience with lately is working with colorectal cancer survivors, especially when it comes to long-term survivorship. It's just not something I have a whole lot of experience with. I haven't treated that patient population in a few years, but I bet you do. Or again, insert other patient population, other diagnosis, other impairments that I don't have that experience with, and I could learn from you. No matter if you've been practicing for 30 years in cancer rehab or if you started last week, there's something that we have to learn from each other here. Again, it is a two-way street. It goes both ways. And so by building this culture where experienced onco-PTs can guide and support our less experienced peers, cancer rehab becomes a more cohesive, innovative, progressive, frankly, effective train. I don't even know, I feel like a steam train here. It's only by collaborating with each other that we are really going to make the changes that are going to improve cancer rehab as a whole. We have to do this together. We cannot do this alone. Collaboration also provides you with much needed support and encouragement. Let's face it. How often have you come home from the hospital or the clinic or wherever you're seeing your patients and you are just drained? Probably frequently. And that's not a reflection on you and your inability to cope with things. This is hard work, okay? PT is hard. Working with other humans can be really difficult sometimes. And then we stack on top of that the emotional labor that comes with caring for people who have been diagnosed with cancer. It's heavy. It's heavy, and it's okay to feel like it's heavy. You don't have to be this, oh, everything's fine all the time. Sometimes it's heavy. Sometimes it's hard. Sometimes it's difficult. Sometimes it's challenging. And it is okay to lean on others for that support. It's more than okay. We should be doing that. We should be leaning on each other to make sure that we are able to keep going. Now, this could look like a bunch of different things, right? Whether these are really like structured team building exercises that you're doing. Maybe you're scheduling, check-ins with your friends, with your colleagues, at your local, burger place or wherever, like once a month or what have you, or even just showing up and acknowledging with a little text or a little message to your friend or colleague, hey, I see you, you're doing great, because that is going to return tenfold to you. When you are able to show up and support your colleagues and your friends and your acquaintances in cancer rehab, your cancer rehab besties, that is going to come back to you. I have seen that time and time again in cancer rehab, which is why I love OncoPT so much, because we show up for each other. I know without a doubt that there are 10 people that I have encountered through OncoPT who I could pick up the phone and say, hey, I am really struggling with this right now. I really need your help. And they would absolutely drop everything, or at least at the end of the day, call me and make sure that, like, hey, what's going on? What do you need from me? And I would do that for them as well. And again, I'm sure that happens in other areas within physical therapy, but OncoPT is just a different level of that. And so when we are actively cultivating a culture, an environment where each OncoPT feels valued and supported, we're going to work together more harmoniously. And this is ultimately going to lead to, again, better care for our patients. When you feel like you have that support, you can then show up and support your patients. And that's what we need to be doing. If there is one thing that Katie Ledecky excels at, it is leading by example. And I don't just mean that in the literal sense of her swimming and lapping other swimmers in her long distance events, which is still so crazy to me. She's doing that, but she's also showing up as a leader, not just for the swimmers on her team, but also for the swimmers who are someday going to be on the Olympic team, who are young swimmers who are looking up to her right now and seeing what she can do, what she is doing, and what she is going to continue doing in whatever she ends up doing for the rest of her life. That is setting an example for every swimmer who comes behind her and knows, if I'm going to show up as a great swimmer, or in our case, as a great OncoPT, I know that this is an example. This is a visible, tangible demonstration of that for me, where I can take and build upon that. Cancer rehab has to take this. We can and we must lead by example too. By consistently showing our strong commitment, your strong commitment to quality patient care, again, harping, emphasizing on the quality patient care here, adhering to ethical standards, and striving for continuously improving ourselves, OncoPTs set a high standard for others to follow. And this leadership approach fosters a culture of excellence where team members, maybe, again, this is in the literal sense of people that you work with, your colleagues, your coworkers, but also, again, the royal we of cancer rehab as a field, as a profession, we're then motivated to emulate those behaviors. And if you're maybe in a position where you're like, I don't really have that. I don't really have someone who I can look to find that leading example that I want to emulate, that I want to implement in my own life, there are places to go and find them. Again, I've mentioned this previously, but one of my favorite things about OncoPT is how much people have been willing to pour into me if I just ask. And so one of the great places is, again, like social media, whether that's Instagram, LinkedIn, YouTube. There's obviously some fantastic OncoPTs on there. Shout out Alex Hill, Kelly Sturm. That's Oncopelvic PT and Cancer Rehab PT, if you were wondering. Great examples out there of leaders within OncoPT who are taking the Olympic torch. We're going to keep with our Olympic metaphor here, who are taking that Olympic torch and charging forward with it. And so this doesn't just affect you immediately, but you are someday going to be a leader in OncoPT that others look up to and want to emulate and want to mimic and mirror in their own lives, in their own practice, with their own patients. You don't have to have a leader right now in front of you that you can say, oh, that's it. That's exactly what I want to be doing. You may need to step up and be that leader for yourself. And a great way to get support for that is through the power of collaboration. And I think this is one of the final things that I really appreciate and enjoy about this collaboration and this very, again, very visible, upfront example that Katie Ledecky is right now in the Olympic team is also by empowering others. So cancer rehab as a whole, we thrive on this concept of empowering others or equipping others with the skills they need to transcend, to become the best version of themselves, to become better than what they were yesterday. That's all of what we do with our patients, right? We are trying to get them to where they have the tools to be just a little bit better tomorrow than they were today. Maybe that means functionally, right? Maybe they're stronger, more flexible, they have better balance. Maybe that means better quality of life. Maybe that means a little more independent. Maybe that means I feel a little safer when I am transferring from my wheelchair to the toilet, right? Everything that we do as Onco PT is all about this. And we have an obligation to implement that also within our profession with each other. And when we take ownership of this, when we truly step into our power as Onco PTs and assume that responsibility, this promotes an environment, a community, a culture, an entire profession of Onco PTs who are encouraged to expand our knowledge and skills, who can, learn from diverse perspectives and innovative approaches to patient care. Because one of the things that I say on here frequently is that when your patients get better, all of our patients get better. And so by learning from others, by collaborating, and by gaining this insight and perspective and getting the feedback, the support, the motivation from other Onco PTs, from other cancer rehab, professionals in this space, we are then able to improve ourselves and what we are doing, and then what we are doing with our patient who's in front of us today. And then all of our patients that we see that day, all of our patients we see that week, that month, that year, and beyond. It starts with this sense of collaboration and community. One of the things that I think has been so detrimental to cancer rehab. Okay, here's a little soapbox for me. I have previously worked in an institution that is like, hey, we do cancer rehab, like all these good things, whatever, but they held their information and their quote knowledge so close to their chest that it unfortunately promoted actually a community or a culture of competition within the organization. Not just, hey, we are competing with these outside entities. It was even competition within the organization itself. And that was very visibly harming patients in the long run, because there was not a sense of, I can go to this other clinician or this other person within the company and get this help. That is not at all what we want to be doing in cancer rehab. Now, as a small business owner myself, I understand that we gotta stay afloat. We gotta pay our bills. We want, of course, to be the sought after specialist in our area. But just as a reminder, friend, there are more than enough patients with cancer to go around. I don't care what state you're in. I don't care what city you're in. I don't care what hospital system or clinic system or whatever you are affiliated with. There are so many people out there who are affected by cancer and getting diagnosed every single day. We will probably not in my lifetime we will not have a match between the number of patients and the amount of physical therapists needed to treat the amount of patients who are diagnosed with cancer. I don't think it's going to happen. I would love for it to happen. I'm optimistic that we will get there. I don't think that I am going to see that in my lifetime, which means for you and me, there's more than enough to go around. And this sense of ruthless competition of, I'm going to hold all of my information to myself. I'm not going to help you over here with your patients. I'm not going to provide any perspective here. that means that there are patients over there who are not getting the help that they need. And that is not at all what we are about here at OncoPT, in OncoPT. Period. That hurts patients. That hurts communities. And that hurts all of cancer rehab. There is no room for that here. You can achieve all of the big, hairy, audacious goals that you have for cancer rehab and for your patients through collaboration. And if you're not totally sold on that yet, if you're like, nah, I'm not, Elise, I don't really think that's right. Hear me out, friend. If you're not quite yet convinced on the power of community, I would really encourage you to save your spot at our upcoming Cancer Rehab Community Conference 2024. Because one of the coolest things that came out of last year's conference is that we had people, first of all across the globe. It was so crazy. It was so cool. It was so crazy. We had global participants who were attending this conference. And what I could see, so I'm pointing to my camera right now. If you're watching this on video, YouTube, you can see what I'm doing. But I had on my computer here, I had half of my screen was like the speaker or the slides of whoever was speaking at that moment. But then over on this side, I had the chat. I had the chat going so I could see, if like there were any problems, if people are having tech issues. For example, I accidentally closed out of the conference at one point. That was annoying, but we got back together. So anyways, I'm doing all of this so I can monitor what's going on. And so as the speakers were presenting, I was just keeping an eye on the chat. And the chat was going off, y'all. It was exploding. And it was so cool to see people that I know because I meet a lot of people virtually through the OncoPT, starting to connect and make those connections. And like, hey, I'm in this area. Oh, I'm in that area too. We should totally meet up. And the amount of that happening was so beautiful. And it was just like a proud auntie moment for me. I was so excited. And the growth that has happened from those initial interactions, from that small community that we just started to build last year at last year's conference, it's going to continue to expand exponentially over the coming years. And gosh, that fires me up. Because that means that cancer rehab is not just available in the big cities, at the big academic institutions for patients who are lucky enough to get there, but is also going to be available for real life example, my granny who lives in rural Iowa, or, like the rest of my family who live in rural, Midwest, or wherever that is for you. We have the potential. You have the power to make it to where every patient can access the highest quality, excellent cancer rehab after they experience a cancer diagnosis. And gosh, that makes me so excited. And it also lets me know that we have a lot of work to do. So you can save your seat now at the Cancer Rehab Community Conference 2024 if you go to the oncopt.com/conference. I would suggest that you hurry and do that ASAP today because prices are going up very soon after this episode releases. And I don't want you to miss out on that. So please make sure that you do that. And I cannot wait to see you there. We have such an amazing panel of dynamic speakers. We also have 2 keynote speakers that you've probably heard of at some point in cancer rehab. First up, Dr. Susan Maltzer, whose name you have heard if you have ever heard me talk about my favorite article, A Focused Review of Safety Considerations in Cancer Rehab by Maltzer et al. 2017. This is that Maltzer, y'all. And we have a dynamic presentation by Maltzer that is coming up. And we also have Dr. Nicole Stout, who is kind of like the godmother of cancer rehab of OncoPT. And she perhaps is one of the biggest influences and has been the Katie Ledecky for me. She reached the hand back, grabbed mine, and pulled me up. And that's what I have loved so much. And like I said, I have benefited so much from that. And we as a cancer rehab community want to continue emphasizing that and making that happen within this next generation and beyond of OncoPTs. So again, save your seat for the Cancer Rehab Community Conference 2024 at the oncopt.com/community. And when you register for the conference, you also get immediate access to our free online community, the Cancer Rehab Community, which I highly encourage you. Get on there and check out what's going on in this community, y'all, because it's really exciting. We've got some really exciting stuff coming up, including a very special office hours with Dr. Adam Matichek that you don't want to miss, but you can only access that if you're a member of the community. To join that, you can go to the oncopt.com/community. That's to join just the community. And if you also want to do that and the conference, go to the oncopt.com/conference. In sum, Katie Ledecky is the GOAT. You already knew that, but also in sum, when we foster a culture of knowledge sharing, of encouragement and support and motivation, when we lead by example, when we offer, constructive feedback and empower and equip our colleagues to better show up for their own patients in their own communities, this is how we curate a more cohesive and effective cancer rehab field that ultimately benefits all patients diagnosed with cancer. And that's what you should be seeking, my friend. So not only do these practices elevate you individually as an OncoPT, but also our entire community, our entire profession. And this is what we need if we are going to take cancer rehab and move it, just launch it forward, which is what we need to do at this very crucial crossroads of where we're at in cancer rehab right now. Don't forget to save your spot at the Cancer Rehab Community Conference. And I have one more call to action for you. This is what I want you to do right now after listening to this podcast. At the time of this release, within the Cancer Rehab community, there is a post. And I want you to go to that post. And it gives you one option. So there's two options. You're going to pick the one that fits you best. If you are newer to cancer rehab, okay, whatever that looks like for you, whatever that definition is for you, I want you to ask a question in the comments. And if you're more experienced in cancer rehab, if you've been around the block once or twice when it comes to treating oncology patients, I want you to then answer one of those questions in the comments posed by a newer OncoPT. Let's start curating this community today together. Let's start working together and building that collaboration that is so necessary if you and I are going to work and catapult cancer rehab into the next century. Thank you so much for joining me for today's episode. Don't forget to join the Cancer Rehab Community Conference. You can find that at theoncopt.com/community. Don't forget to do your action step, comment on that post with either your question or your answer, and I will see you in the next episode of the OncoPT podcast. And until next time, this is Elise with the OncoPT. And remember, you are exactly the physical therapist that your patients with cancer need. So let's get to work.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the OncoPT podcast. If you'd like to help support the podcast, please share it with others, leave a rating and review, or support us on Patreon.